It's 2:47 a.m. You've been staring at the ceiling for what feels like hours. Your partner is sleeping peacefully beside you. Your phone is charging across the room. The house is completely silent. And yet your mind is anything but quiet. Because right now, in this moment, your brain has decided to resurrect a conversation from 4 years ago. That meeting where you mispronounced a colleague's name. That coffee date where you laughed too loudly at your own joke. That text exchange where you used 3 exclamation points when one would have been sufficient. And here you are, picking apart every syllable, every micro-expression, every pause that lasted just a fraction of a second too long. You're running forensic analysis on a social interaction that the other person has almost certainly forgotten entirely. They've moved on. They've had thousands of conversations since then. But you're still there, trapped in that moment, watching it play out on repeat like some kind of psychological torture device you've built for yourself. Here's what I wish someone had told me years ago. This isn't just anxiety. I mean, yes, it's definitely anxiety too. We're not going to pretend it isn't. But there's something far more complex happening beneath the surface. Something that reveals how you fundamentally view yourself and your place in the world. Something that exposes the invisible war happening between who you are and who you think you need to be. The rewriting project your brain won't quit. Most people assume that when we replay conversations, we're trying to decode the other person. We're amateur psychologists attempting to read between the lines, searching for hidden meanings, looking for evidence that they think we're inadequate or strange or fundamentally unlikable. And sure, that's part of it. But that's not the core of what's actually happening. When you replay a conversation in your mind, you're not analyzing it. You're auditioning different versions of yourself. You're running simulations of alternate realities where you were funnier, sharper, more charming, more composed. Where you had the perfect comeback ready. Where you didn't stumble over that word. Where you projected confidence instead of revealing uncertainty. You're engaging in a painful form of time travel where you desperately try to rewrite history, knowing full well that you can't. And the agony of it comes from this. You're forever stuck with the version of yourself that actually showed up. That moment has already happened. It's been sealed into the past. And no amount of mental gymnastics will ever change what you actually said or did. Consider the specific conversations that haunt you most. I'd bet money they're not the catastrophic ones where you said something truly offensive or cruel. Those we can often rationalize or apologize for directly. No, the ones that keep you awake are the minor infractions. The moments where you were just slightly awkward. Where you overshared by about 2 sentences. Where you used the wrong tone. Where you came across as trying too hard, or not trying hard enough, or just existing in that uncomfortable middle ground of being imperfectly human. These microscopic moments balloon into massive psychological events because they serve as evidence for something your inner critic has been trying to prove all along. You're not who you wish you were. You're not the polished, effortlessly cool, naturally charismatic version of yourself that exists only in your imagination. And your brain absolutely cannot let this go. Psychologists and researchers who study self-perception have identified a fascinating pattern. We engage in rumination most intensely when there's a discrepancy between our actual self and our ideal self. That gap, that distance between who we are and who we think we should be, creates a kind of psychological tension that our minds try desperately to resolve. So every time you replay that awkward interaction, you're not really processing what happened. You're trying to collapse a gap that exists entirely within your own perception. You're rehearsing a version of yourself that never got the chance to exist, hoping that somehow, through sheer mental repetition, you can retroactively become that person. It's like being stuck in a video game where you keep hitting restart, convinced that this time, you'll make all the right moves and achieve the perfect outcome. Except the game has already been completed. The score is final. And no amount of replaying will change the results. But here's where things get really fascinating and honestly, kind of heartbreaking. The conversation you're replaying isn't even real anymore. Every single time you recall a memory, you're not accessing some pristine recording stored safely in your brain's archive. Human memory doesn't work like a video file that you can play back with perfect fidelity. Instead, it works more like a story that gets retold, and with each retelling, it shifts and morphs and changes in subtle ways. Neuroscientists have discovered something profound. When you remember something, you're actually remembering the last time you remembered it. Each recall is a reconstruction, not a playback. And every time you reconstruct that memory, you have the opportunity to alter it, usually without even realizing you're doing so. That conversation you've replayed 15 times? You're no longer analyzing what actually happened. You're analyzing a heavily edited version that's been filtered through your anxiety, colored by your insecurities, warped by your fear of judgment, and distorted by your perfectionist tendencies. You've unwittingly created a Frankenstein's monster of a memory, stitched together from fragments of reality and generous portions of your own catastrophizing imagination. Which means, and I need you to really sit with this for a moment, you are literally torturing yourself over something that didn't happen the way you remember it happening. The version playing in your head right now is almost certainly worse than what actually occurred. You've amplified the awkward silences. You've exaggerated the other person's negative reactions, which may not have even been negative at all. You've invented entire internal monologues for them where they're judging you, critiquing you, finding you lacking. You've taken their neutral facial expression and transformed it into proof of their disappointment. And the cruelest part? The more you replay it, the more real this fictional version becomes. Each replay reinforces the distorted memory, making it feel more true, more accurate, more undeniable. Your brain is essentially gaslighting you with your own memories, convincing you that your anxious interpretation is objective fact. Every single time you recall a memory, you're not accessing some pristine recording stored safely in your brain's archive. Human memory doesn't work like a video file that you can play back with perfect fidelity. Instead, it works more like a story that gets retold, and with each retelling, it shifts and morphs and changes in subtle ways. Neuroscientists have discovered something profound. When you remember something, you're actually remembering the last time you remembered it. Each recall is a reconstruction, not a playback. And every time you reconstruct that memory, you have the opportunity to alter it, usually without even realizing you're doing so. That conversation you've replayed 15 times? You're no longer analyzing what actually happened. You're analyzing a heavily edited version that's been filtered through your anxiety, colored by your insecurities, warped by your fear of judgment, and distorted by your perfectionist tendencies. You've unwittingly created a Frankenstein's monster of a memory, stitched together from fragments of reality and generous portions of your own catastrophizing imagination. Which means, and I need you to really sit with this for a moment, you are literally torturing yourself over something that didn't happen the way you remember it happening. The version playing in your head right now is almost certainly worse than what actually occurred. You've amplified the awkward silences. You've exaggerated the other person's negative reactions, which may not have even been negative at all. You've invented entire internal monologues for them where they're judging you, critiquing you, finding you lacking. You've taken their neutral facial expression and transformed it into proof of their disappointment. And the cruelest part? The more you replay it, the more real this fictional version becomes. Each replay reinforces the distorted memory, making it feel more true, more accurate, more undeniable. Your brain is essentially gaslighting you with your own memories, convincing you that your anxious interpretation is objective fact. Now, I can already hear the objection forming in your mind. But I'm not just ruminating for no reason. I'm learning from my mistakes. I'm analyzing what went wrong so I can do better next time. I'm engaging in valuable self-reflection that will help me grow as a person. And look, I completely understand that perspective. It sounds noble. It sounds like exactly the kind of thing an emotionally intelligent, growth-oriented person would do. But here's the difficult truth that took me far too long to accept. There is a world of difference between reflection and rumination, and most of us have convinced ourselves we're doing the former, when we're actually trapped in the latter. Reflection is purposeful. It has structure and direction. You think about what happened. You identify a specific lesson or insight. You consider how you might approach similar situations differently in the future, and then you move on. It's a process with a clear beginning, middle, and end. You extract wisdom, and then you release the experience. Rumination, on the other hand, is a hamster wheel. You think about what happened. You identify a lesson. Then you forget the lesson because you're too busy replaying the scene again. So you identify the same lesson a second time. Then you spiral into self-criticism. Then you replay it yet again from a different angle. Then you extract the same lesson for a third time while simultaneously questioning your entire worth as a human being. Then you replay it once more. And then you wonder why it's 4 a.m. and you haven't slept. It's a closed loop. And closed loops, by definition, don't take you anywhere. They just keep you spinning in place, burning energy while making zero forward progress. The people who replay conversations most obsessively aren't the ones most committed to personal growth. They're the ones most desperate for control. And I say this with tremendous compassion and zero judgment, because I've lived this pattern myself. I know it intimately. Research into rumination and mental health has revealed a striking pattern. People who struggle to extend compassion to themselves get trapped in these mental loops far more frequently and far more intensely than those who can treat themselves with kindness. And those loops don't just exist in isolation. They feed directly into broader anxiety patterns. They reinforce the belief that you need to be perfect to deserve love, acceptance, and basic human kindness. They convince you that a single verbal stumble reveals some deep, irreparable flaw in your character. The less forgiving you are of your own inevitable humanness, the more viciously your brain will punish you for displaying it. It's like living with an internal courtroom where you're simultaneously the defendant and the prosecutor, except the trial never ends. New evidence is constantly being introduced, and the verdict is always guilty. Your brain transforms into your harshest critic, your most unforgiving judge, your cruelest observer. And unlike an actual court system, there's no appeals process. There's no statute of limitations. That awkward thing you said at a party in 2019? Still admissible as evidence. Still proof of your unworthiness. Still grounds for conviction. The real tragedy of conversation replaying isn't that you said something awkward 6 years ago. Everyone says awkward things. Everyone has moments where they wish they could edit themselves in real time. That's not the tragedy. The tragedy is that you've spent 6 years allowing that single moment to define you. You've taken one data point, one brief interaction that lasted maybe 10 minutes of your entire life, and you've elevated it to the status of ultimate truth about who you are. You've built an entire identity narrative around it. I want you to consider something that might shift your perspective. What if the conversations you replay most frequently aren't actually the ones that matter most? What if you can't stop thinking about them precisely because, on some level, they don't represent who you truly are? Your brain might be stuck in this loop because it recognizes an inconsistency. It knows that the awkward version of you in that particular conversation isn't the complete picture. It's trying to reconcile how this single moment fits with everything else it knows about you, with all the other interactions where you were warm and funny and articulate and kind. It's your mind saying, this doesn't compute. This doesn't match the larger pattern. I need to keep examining it until I understand why there's a discrepancy. And maybe, just maybe, The solution isn't to replay it more skillfully or to finally decode its hidden meaning. Maybe the solution is to stop granting one conversation so much power over your entire self-concept. Maybe it's recognizing that you're investing massive amounts of mental and emotional energy into something that happened in the past at the expense of being fully present in your current life. Think about all the mental bandwidth you're dedicating to these replays. All that processing power, all that creative energy, all that analytical capacity. What if you redirected it? What if instead of ruminating on conversations from years ago, you invested that energy into the people in front of you right now? Into the relationships you're building today? Into the conversations you're having this week that you'll actually have the power to influence and shape? Here's a fundamental truth about conversations that we often forget. They're just moments. Brief, fleeting moments in time. They're not prophecies about who you'll always be. They're not irrefutable evidence of some permanent character defect. They're not cosmic judgments on your worth as a human being. They're simply moments where you showed up as an imperfect person doing your best with the resources and awareness you had available at that particular point in time. And that's not just acceptable. That's the only thing any of us can ever do. The person you were in that conversation you keep replaying was operating with limitations. They didn't have the gift of hindsight. They didn't know what the other person was thinking. They didn't have a script or a second take or the ability to pause and craft the perfect response. They were just a human being, in real time, navigating a social interaction with all the inherent uncertainty and imperfection that entails. And, honestly, that person deserves your compassion, not your contempt. They were doing their best. They were showing up. They were being vulnerable enough to engage with another human being, which always carries the risk of not getting it exactly right. Maybe it's time to stop pressing rewind. Maybe it's time to let those conversations stay where they belong, in the past, preserved in their imperfect, awkward, beautifully and painfully human state. Not because they don't matter, but because you matter more. The person you are today matters more. The conversations you're having right now matter more. The relationships you're building in the present tense matter more. You are not defined by the worst version of yourself in your worst conversational moment. You are defined by the entirety of who you are, the full spectrum of your interactions, the complete picture of your humanity. If you find yourself stuck in these patterns, here are some practices that might help create space between you and the replay loop. First, when you notice yourself starting to replay a conversation, acknowledge it without judgment. Oh, I'm replaying that interaction again. Not, I'm being stupid and obsessive again. Just, I notice I'm doing this thing I do. Second, ask yourself, what am I actually trying to solve right now? Often, we're not trying to solve anything. We're just punishing ourselves. Naming that can deflate its power. Third, practice the letter you'll never send technique. Write out everything you wish you'd said, every perfect response, every witty comeback. Get it all out on paper. Then, and this is crucial, destroy it or delete it. The act of externalizing it and then releasing it can help your brain let go. Fourth, set a timer for rumination, if you must ruminate. I'm going to think about this for exactly 7 minutes, and then I'm done. When the timer goes off, you move on. This creates boundaries around something that usually has none. Fifth, redirect that analytical energy towards something genuinely productive. Write something. Create something. Solve an actual problem you have right now. Not one from 3 years ago that you can't change. And finally, practice speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to a friend who came to you with the same worry. Would you tell them they're fundamentally broken because of one awkward conversation? Would you insist they analyze it for the 100th time? Or would you offer them perspective, kindness, and a reminder that everyone has these moments? The most profound shift happens when you realize that the present moment contains infinite possibility, while the past contains none. You can't change what you said yesterday, last week, or last year. But you have complete agency over what you say today. Every conversation you're having right now is a chance to be the person you wish you'd been in those conversations you keep replaying. Every current interaction is an opportunity to practice the growth you're supposedly trying to achieve through all that rumination. The wisdom you're seeking through endless mental replays, it doesn't come from analyzing the past. It comes from showing up fully in the present, from being brave enough to be imperfect in real time, rather than perfect in retrospect. Your life is happening right now, in this moment, not in the conversations you're replaying from years ago. The people who matter to you are in front of you now, not frozen in time in some interaction that's already over. So maybe that conversation from 6 years ago can finally stay there, in the past, where it belongs. Not because it was perfect, but because you've learned everything you're going to learn from it. Not because it doesn't matter, but because you have more important things to do with your mental energy than prosecuting yourself for being human. You are enough. You were always enough. Even in that awkward moment. Even when you stumbled over your words. Even when you laughed too loud or stayed too quiet or said the wrong thing or missed your moment. You were enough then. You're enough now. And maybe it's time you started believing it. If this exploration resonated with you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the psychology of everyday life. And if you want to support this kind of content, the join button is there. Your support genuinely makes this work possible. There are more videos in this series exploring similar themes from different angles, same depth, different perspectives. I'll see you there.